there are reports that say rebel forces killed at least 60 Shiite Muslims in a village in eastern Syria. The Syrian government says the civilians were supporters of the regime. This latest allegation underscores the religious tone that fighting has taken in recent months, pitting Sunni and Shiite Muslims against one another. Religious violence on the rise. Some analysts say it shows that moderate Sunni rebels are losing control of the more extremist elements, the more jihadi elements within their ranks. And there are reports that U.S. President Barack Obama could make a decision this very week to arm the rebels in Syria. Senior White House officials have said a meeting is taking place today with top aides from the State and Defense Departments as well as the CIA to discuss the possible strategies. With more on this, Ivan Eland is standing by in Washington. He's a defense analyst with the Independent Institute. Ivan, what do you think about this discussion that is happening right now? Is now the time?
Well, I think no, it is not the time. It's the worst confluence of factors. You have pressure because the regime has defeated the rebels in a key town, and that the rebel cause may be unraveling, while at the same time they're becoming more radicalized. So, of course, the U.S. is feeling pressure to aid the rebels in a lethal manner. But, of course, as you just mentioned, the real question is the Islamists and the jihadis, including some affiliated with al-Qaeda, seem to be dominating and the rebel movement. And this is not uncommon in a revolution or a war. Usually the most ruthless people get the weapons one way or another, and they use them ruthlessly.
There are certain people in Western capitals, including where you are in Washington, but also, in London and Paris, perhaps in Berlin as well. There's this sense, we have to do something because the rebels are now losing this war and ultimately could end up losing it altogether if we don't do something. I mean, do you think the Obama administration will arm the rebels?
I think they probably will under pressure, but I think it's the wrong way to go. I think it's not a good idea to say we versus they, because the Russians and Iranians are our adversaries and they're on the other side. Therefore, if our side, because we've sort of backed into supporting them by giving them non-lethal aid and that sort of thing. If our side is then losing, we have to do something, and that's the problem with these situations, is when you're in for a penny, you're in for a dollar or whatever, and you really have to watch the slippery slope here. And I think the administration, regrettably, is going to get sucked into this. And I think we should have learned a long time ago, after the Mujahideen experience during the 1980s with the Soviet Union, and I would even say more recently with Libya, with the ambassador being killed and militias running around, many armed militias running around Libya, that we need to be careful in getting involved in this stuff, because there's a lot of unintended consequences to war. And this is not a strategic area for the United States at all, and I would argue for the rest of the West either. It may be for Israel, but Israel is very capable of dealing with it, but I'm not even sure that Israel knows what it wants to have happen in Syria.
Yeah, Ivan, you raise an interesting point about the analogy with Afghanistan and the Mujahideen in the 80s and the Soviet invasion there. I mean, if the Obama administration arms the rebels, does this become some kind of proxy war with Russia? I mean, you have the Russians arming the Syrians. We know that. They give them political support. They give them military support. So then what?
Right. Well, then you have a proxy war. You may have a larger regional war, and you may, of course, the sectarian divisions will probably even get worse because the Sunnis are on one side and everybody else is on the other side.
All right, so then what is the answer? If the answer is not to arm them, the rebels that is, and if we see that some of the more jihadi elements are being armed, some of the more jihadi rebel elements being armed by the Saudis and the Qataris, what would your solution be?
Well, I think we have to look at what the U.S. strategic interest and the strategic interest of the West is, and I really don't see much. As I say, it's strategic to Israel, but not to the United States. I really don't think we need to get dragged into this. We can't just say, well, our side is losing, so we should give a bunch of weapons. It shouldn't be our side. And very frankly, we've lived with Assad for years, and it's very tempting when 80,000 people have been killed, but there are many wars which have been bigger, for the Congo, the Sudan, in which the West did not get directly involved, and I think we can stay out of it, and we can overcome the pressure to get involved in it. And I don't think we're going to save any lives by putting more arms into the conflict, if that's what our goal is.
Ivan, great talking to you. Really appreciate your
you.
time. Thanks so much. Ivan Eland coming to us from Washington.